Hello, welcome. As folks are filing in through the waiting room, we're opening the doors. So excited to have all of you here. Thank you so much for being here for the Power to Fly Chat and Learn. I am Hunter. I am one of your hosts and moderators here at Power to Fly, and I am so grateful and honored to be doing this chat. We have two amazing speakers today, and we're going to get into their introductions in just a moment. I'm sure y'all are super stoked. Feel free, as many of you are right now, turn on your cameras. That's great. You can participate. No need to feel, Instagram ready. We're all working remotely here. We know the drill at this point. And a little bit of FaceTime is a great way to make a connection with our speakers today. So feel free to do that. Know that this is being recorded, so you could pop up in the live in the recording, and we'll be sending a rewatch link in a few days, so you can post that to your YouTube channel or however you want to repost it and rewatch it. So how this works, friends, is over the next hour, a bunch of y'all sent questions in advance. Those are the pre-submitted questions. And so we have curated those. We have anonymized them, so I don't know who wrote those now, just FYI. So if you hear a question and you want to highlight that, shout out in the chat, feel free to do that. Excuse me. And if you have a question that comes up now, feel free to drop that in the chat, and myself and our speakers can take a look at that and try to touch on that as well. Also, if you'd like to ask a question anonymously, if I just said question, I apologize in advance. A question. If you have a question that you'd like to ask anonymously, feel free to go over to the chat, select my name, Hunter, and you can DM me there. Or if anything comes up, that's a great way to reach out, and we can try to address whatever's going on. And also feel free to follow us on all the social medias at Power to Fly, hashtag Power to Fly, on all the things, and that way you can tag and repost. Okay, that's enough housekeeping, friends. Without further ado, so excited to introduce our speakers from Riot Games. You know them, you love them. So much awesome stuff coming out of Riot Games. Forefront on so many fronts. So we have Lynda Tang is one of our speakers today. Lynda is a technical game designer at Riot Games, working across Riot's 5 titles to ensure that players have the best in-game experience possible. She started at Riot as an intern back in 2016 and now works as a set lead on teamfight tactics. Lynda received both her bachelor's in computer science and her master's in human-computer interaction from MIT. Very cool. Welcome, Lynda. You'll see that unfortunately Lynda's camera is not available for this chat, but she is here live with us, and she will be speaking and can use the chat as well, I believe. Okay, and we have Julia Marsh. Julia is currently Director of User Experience Designer on the VALORANT at Riot Games. It's Riot's competitive 5 versus 5 character-based tactical shooter, and the user experience team is central to defining the team's product and feature visions for our players. The UX team is entrusted to design solutions that help players understand and operate our game systems. Julia has worked in the game industry since 2015 and has 15 years plus experience in UX across branding, e-commerce, e-commerce and software development. Great. Welcome, Julia and Lynda. So grateful to have you here. Lynda, how are you? We'll start with you.
I'm doing good. Thank you, Hunter.
I'm glad to hear it. Yeah. And Julia, welcome. How are you today?
I am doing great. Thanks so much, Hunter. And hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, what an amazing turnout. This is so fun. It's so fun to see all your faces. This chat is blowing up. Thank you so much. I love this. Okay, friends, so how this works, just to recap, we have some pre-submitted questions that a lot of y'all wrote in advance. Thank you for sending those. And so if you have any new questions that come in, drop them in the chat. I will be keeping my eyes on it as best I can. And so will Lynda and Julia. We're all going to keep our eye out. We got Texas, we got the Bay Area. It's going so fast. We got Chicago, we got New York City coming in, Florida. I'm also in New York. Heyo. So keep those questions and those chats coming. I love it. So first off, with a pre-submitted question, we had, we're going to do this with both you and Lynda, maybe we can kick it off with you. How would you describe the culture in the gaming industry, and what is it that you love about it?
I think I just love how collaborative and creative the industry is. Because I think as designers, you'll go to work and you'll do your own designs, but I believe that some of the best designs come from you and another designers or another group of designers, and you're just jamming together. And that kind of creative energy is really just what motivates me and what gets me going.
I love that. Thank you, Lynda. And Julia, how about you?
Yeah, plus one to what Lynda said. I think it's a really collaborative environment on every team I've worked on and both the companies I've worked on in games. I think also what I enjoy about it is we get to work on something that we're all passionate about. I think that's something that's a real privilege of working in gaming, especially if you're a gamer, right? Like you get to work on a product that reaches millions and millions of people globally, and something that you get to care passionately about and make experiences better for folks. And definitely, again, plus one to the collaboration and just the people. Like the games industry is really, as we all know, as what the reason we're here, it can be difficult to get into, and we often companies have really specific things they're looking for in folks that they bring on, and so the people that you get to work with are some of the best in their crafts, around the world, and I think that's really awesome as well.
Yeah, that is so awesome. I love that you're both feeling that connection of collaboration and have this global reach in what you're making. Because as someone that's you're working on from different sides, and you're artists in your own way, and you're really getting to show your work like it's this global audience. It's really, and interact with it, which is totally unique in this time. It's so cool. So can you both speak to, and Lynda, we can pop back over to you. Can you both talk about your journeys getting into Riot? So Lynda, I love that you started as an intern. We read a little bit on your bio, so we can hear more about that. And what was it like entering the industry, and maybe some of the challenges you faced in your entering the industry and in your journey that you've been on so far?
So I started as an intern, and the way that I got into design was actually pretty weird because I initially applied as an engineering intern to Riot, and when I applied, it was like kind of fairly late because I had been debating to myself whether or not I should have applied. No, actually, one of the other designers, August Browning, was like, had come to campus and he was like, you should apply, because if you don't apply, then you have a 0% chance of getting in. But even if you do apply, even no matter how small that is, you like have that chance is always going to be bigger than 0, right? And so that's what motivated me to apply for the internship. But I was really late for the engineering internships, and they were like, oh, all our slots got filled this year, but we see that you've done a lot of design work in your, schoolwork and research projects and stuff outside of that. So is this design something that you wanted to try? And I said, yes. And I think at that point for me, it was like a risk because I was like, not sure if I was going to be good at it. This is like a completely new field that I had like never really thought of myself into getting into at that time. And I was really glad I did, because I think without that push and without the recruiter being like, hey, we see that the thing that you originally wanted was like, not there, but we see that you have like strength in this other aspect. So is this something that you wanted to try? And so that's how I got my internship as a designer at Riot. And I liked it so much, that year, that I decided to come back as a technical designer. And then afterwards, I came back full time.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And it's so, I think, encouraging to hear the story about the recruiter. I really love that they were like, oh, this isn't available. There's this other thing. You have this passionate. We see the spark. We see the potential. Do you want to try it? And I love hearing that, because I feel like, and we can get more into this later with some of our other questions about the interview process, right? but like recruiters, they want to find a fit, you know, they're looking for you. And it can seem, you know, after so many interviews, sometimes it can seem hopeless sometimes. And I love hearing this story that it's very hopeful, that it's like, oh no, they're rooting for you and they found a place, a suggestion, you took it and you ran with it. It's so cool, Lynda.
Yeah, that's pretty much too. I think like without that recruiter being able to like you reach out and say that, I don't think I would have ever even thought about being a designer or be where I am today. So I'm really thankful.
That's so awesome. And has there been other stuff? So you came in, you worked as the intern, you came back. And so have there been other, as you've changed and moved within the program or the company, excuse me, of like moving up in it, were there any challenges there with like shifting gears, with more responsibility or anything in that world?
I feel like I'll be spoiling a lot of stuff for the later on questions if I talk about it now.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, spoilers, no spoilers, everyone. Julia, how about you? And maybe that getting started aspect.
Yeah. First of all, Lynda and I have already talked about this, but I love that with both of us as speakers, we have two very different paths into the games industry and into our current roles. So I think that's really awesome. How did I get into the gaming industry? Well, actually, I worked in a lot of other industries before gaming, so I didn't join gaming straight out of grad school or college. I worked initially in branding. My background is in fine art and graphic design originally, and so I did some work at a branding studio, and I worked at an e-commerce startup in the UK for a few years, doing systems design and e-commerce backend stuff. But while I was at that job, I have always been a gamer myself. I've been playing, World of Warcraft since vanilla. Always, my brother and I always had this ritual of playing games over Christmas. Like we would take Christmas break and get a game and try to like clear the game before we had to go back to school. So I've always been a super passionate gamer. And while I was at another job, I noticed that there was a roll up at Blizzard actually for something that I thought, oh my gosh, like actually I might be a fit for this role. And I had never thought about working in the games industry. It had just never occurred to me that the games industry needed UX designers or what type of UX designers those might be. And so yeah, I applied to this role, a role at Blizzard, actually Blizzard Entertainment, who makes games like Warcraft and Overwatch, if you've heard of those, StarCraft. And so yeah, I applied to that role, and it was actually a step down in role level from what I had been doing currently, actually maybe 2 steps down. But I was really intrigued by the team and the project that they were going to be kicking off, and the idea that I would get to come in and sort of help form the team and have a lot of autonomy to drive this product. And that product, by the way, was coming in to lead design on the Overwatch League when it's set up. And so yeah, so I interviewed. Games. We'll probably talk about it more in further questions, but games company interviews can be quite a long process, but I went through the process and I ended up joining that team and starting to work with esports.
I love that. I love that. Oh, and you're giving me some nostalgia feels for Warcraft and StarCraft. Oh my gosh. So many hours. Oh man. I loved those games so much. And I love hearing about that. It is kind of amazing how you have such different ways in. I love that. And like you said, we're going to get more into it too. So someone asked in the chat too, where do your questions go? If you want to ask more questions, you can drop them in the chat. I love how lively this chat is. So if y'all can help me out a little bit, you could either DM me, might be easier, honestly, because that way it'll pop up red and I will notice your questions. It'll be a little easier to find. So I think for this group, that's what I would suggest so that it can shine a little bit more. So you can just go to my box, select chat, or any of the speakers. But for me, I'm keeping the eye on it. That's my my role here. Or if you want to do it publicly in the chat, if you just start with a capital word question, and I can see that also helps because we do that sometimes with these larger groups. Okay. So moving along, in the meantime, I'm going to go back to some of the pre-submitted questions also written by y'all. So thank you so much for submitting these in advance. So this one is for you, Julia. As someone who didn't come from gaming, as you mentioned, can you talk about some of the ways to showcase your transferable skills or experience from other industries? So some folks that might be pivoting or interested in getting into gaming, what were some of yours that you used, and how did you figure that out? That's like, oh, that's transferable. Oh, cool. I will put that there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and I think we might touch on this in other questions too, but one of the main things that I always tell folks who are considering applying is that, games is, at the end of the day, games is just another industry that needs all the disciplines out there. We need designers and engineers and product managers and QA and everything. So having a really deep expertise in your craft skill set, whatever that craft is sort of the number one thing we're looking for. It does help sometimes to be someone who's passionate about gaming or an experienced gamer, or maybe you've competed in esports events, or maybe you've worked in other companies that are related to gaming, because we can see that that helps drive your understanding of our products. But honestly, it's really about craft skills for a lot of the roles, and those overlap wildly. Things like, for a UX designer specifically, things like having the ability to have deep systems understandings of all the interconnected systems in our games or any other product you've worked on, or having the empathy to understand the basics of user research and how we can reach out to our players and get feedback, things like that. So for me, coming from gaming, or I'm sorry, not starting in gaming, but coming from another industry into gaming, that's a lot of what I showcased in my interview, was that hey, I haven't worked in games before, but I have led design on large scale systems projects, and I have worked with really complicated business goals. And I have also been playing games since I was in diapers, and I'm really passionate about it and involved in the esports community of your games. So I think that there's different ways that you can sort of craft that narrative around what it is you do and that you want to do and what it is you want to bring to any given company. And I think that's true outside of games too, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love the image too. Playing games since diapers is a funny thing. And like that's like probably true for us, but like now more than ever for like the next, like that is absolutely real. Like sure we had, I mean, I can only speak for myself, like Nintendo and Sega and stuff like that, but like now it's like there's every game imaginable under the sun, and it's really exciting to like see like this next generation too, of like all these folks that are coming in that literally know these games inside and out, like yourself, like you're saying, like of how to create the next ones too.
Absolutely. And I think you don't have to, we often don't look for people to, it doesn't have to be so narrow even as video games. Like there's tabletop RPGs. Do you play D&D? Do you play Magic? Do you play board games? Those types of experience also translate really well.
I love that. I love that too. Were there like soft skills too that you felt like were transferable, or was
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's especially in UX specifically, there's a huge need for empathy. Again, we're not designing for I'm not designing for me or for my archetype of player and what I enjoy. We're trying to design for the players that are playing our games. And so the ability to research and understand that and have empathy for other people and their motivations and what they're looking for. Again, it's not just about what you want and what you think is cool or what you think would be fun. I think that's one of the main ones that transfers over.
I love that. Thank you. And it's so important, right? Because if that's such an interesting point. I hadn't thought about empathy in that way. It's like, oh, to be empathetic from someone's situation, but I love that context of you're not designing for you. That is really, I don't know. I think I'm going to drill into that more as we go on, because it's like, oh, that's really true. Like you said, you're working with this global community of players. And it really is like, how can you bring yourself to the work, but also know that it's larger than your own opinions and biases and stuff like that. That is really cool. So friends, thank you so much. This group knows how to take a note. I'm getting lots of questions. I'm getting DMs. I am copying and pasting them to another doc so I can see them. So I'm going to start peppering those in as well. So thank you. And I love people are writing big, bold question. Like, thank you. Thank you. Y'all are making this so effective and easy. This is an awesome chat. Okay. So next question. Lynda, can you talk a little bit about the role of product designers in gaming versus other industries? And can you talk about like some of the similarities and differences?
I think I can talk a little bit less about other industries, considering that my past has always been in gaming. But I think one of the things that Julie and I talked about is as a designer in the beginning, even as like a game designer in the beginning, you're like, oh, I get to like make cool stuff. But as you grow up or as you go up in more senior levels, you're like, ah, I'm a product designer all along because, or like you end up dabbing in some of the product designer skills because you're thinking about like, what does your timeline look like? What are your resources? Like in the end, I think a lot of game designers have like end up doing some amount of product design and some amount of product management. And I think like the core things about like product designers is to kind of what Julia said, having empathy for the player and being able to anticipate what they need and like what things that they would find fun.
I love that. Okay, so we're getting so many great questions, y'all, and we have about 40 minutes left. So keep them coming. I'm gonna start peppering these in. We had a question come in, and I'll let Lynda, Julia, you can kind of popcorn this next question. Someone asked, what are some recommendations you advise to be able to get in a better opportunity in popular gaming industries such as this? So since Riot Games is a well-known gaming company, are there any classes or opportunities we should know about that can increase the chance of getting into this work industry? Would either of you like to touch on that?
I can start, but definitely love to hear what Lynda thinks as well. I think with any game company, Riot included, one of the best ways to get started, especially if you're a student or a new grad or sort of starting out in your career path, is to keep an eye out on the internships. Both Blizzard and Riot, again, the two companies I've worked for, have really robust internship programs. They're paid, they're very well structured, and they're great opportunities to sort of dip your foot in and get some real experience. Again, we don't have those kind of internships where it's like, come get everybody coffee, right? You dive in, you're on a team, you're part of the team, you work on a real project. We try to make it something that will ship or will help ship something as soon as possible. So it's really a great opportunity. So I definitely recommend Blizzard and Riot internship programs as like a main way. If you're not a new grad, or if you're someone who's maybe looking to shift from another industry or shift your sort of craft expertise, I think that, and I think I maybe had this as an answer to one of the other questions we would talk about, but I think there are things that you can do, like, for instance, with me coming from like an e-commerce startup design background, I sort of organically involved myself in the industry, like naturally. I sort of would go to local meetups occasionally, or if there were esports viewing events, I attended those. I sort of ended up meeting people through social, again, like kind of organically, like just commenting on something that I saw, or seeing a Twitch streamer that I thought was really funny and participating in their community. And I think there are just ways that can start to immerse yourself in the industry, and you can get a sense for like knowing people and just get a sense for how it feels. And I think that helps quite a bit too, is that sort of knowledge you gain around your craft as well.
I love that. Thank you, Julia. Lynda?
Plus one to what Julia said, if you're a student, I would highly recommend doing internships at big game companies. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be like Riot or Blizzard size. I know there's some medium to small game companies that offer really good internships too, that let you like get your feet wet. And I think one of the tips that I want to give to students is like to try to do the projects and the gaming projects that you're passionate about, and try to do it in a way that lets you like not overload yourself with schoolwork. So what I mean is, like, instead of trying to take like 5 classes and doing like projects on the side, because I think as a student, like there's a perception that all the companies are like, oh, we want you to get straight A's in all your classes, but also like do side projects. And like to be honest, I think that's just unreasonable in a way to burn yourself out, but being really smart about like the classes that you take. So for example, you take like 5 classes, but one of the classes is like a video game design class, or one of the classes is like an independent project class where you get the opportunity to make games. Will let you like make games in your course curriculum, and when you apply to these companies, be like, hey, these are like the classes that I've taken, and this is like the project that I made, but not also overstress yourself out. And so that would be my advice for students. And I think for people coming outside the industry, plus one to what Julia said, is just really refine your craft, and understand like the transferable skills of your own industry to gaming, because I think in the end, there's just a lot of skills that are just universal, and being able to be really good at them. For example, just communication, project planning, etc., will be useful no matter where you go.
Awesome. Thank you, Lynda and Julia, both for those answers. It's super helpful. Julia, we're going to pop over to you because we have a pre-submitted question that I feel like we're getting a lot of variation of in the chat right now. So I'd love to touch on this one. What skills and attributes do you look for in a potential candidate with no previous experience in the gaming industry? Could you provide examples of what previous candidates did to catch your attention or differentiate themselves during the recruiting process? What a great question. So I think a lot of y'all asked this question in one way or another. So tune in, friends, lean in.
Yeah, that's absolutely
pressure,
a great
Julia.
question. No, not at all. That's a great question. I think there's a lot of context that will vary between companies and jobs and roles. So I kind of want to talk about specifically some of my roles I've had in the past and folks I've hired, but I also want to give some general advice. So I think often when I'm hiring, and when most hiring managers are hiring, we're looking to fill a specific need on the team. And so that will vary based on what team it's on, what project they're working on, what feature they're working on. And some roles, again, at Riot within design, some roles require a very specific relationship to gaming, a very specific understanding of games, but often some roles don't. And so recently, and maybe not recently, I think last year sometime, I had a role available on VALORANT, and we were looking for a designer. And, this role really involved in our meta systems, but we didn't need someone who had particularly designed for games before. We had the team structured in a way that we would have enough bandwidth to help onboard this person and train them into the role. And so we hired for that. And so when I was interviewing folks for that role, like I wasn't specifically looking for someone to come in with games industry experience. And I ended up hiring someone who came to us from a different company, from another tech company, and she had never worked in gaming. But what she did do that, again, what did the candidate do that stood out for me was she had a really robust portfolio, again, that showcased a really high product sensibility and an ability to work within really complex product systems. She was able to walk through her portfolio, speak to the outcomes, the output, the success, and the failures she went through. She presented her portfolio really concisely. She was able to answer questions when we deep dived into some of her decision making and who she worked with. And she also spoke to her collaboration, i.e. like the work in her portfolio was not all work that she did. It was large scale projects from large teams that were multidisciplinary, and she was able to really concisely speak to her role and how she collaborated with these other disciplines. And all of that showed me that she had the skill set to jump into this team and this role we were hiring, and be really successful. And we knew that she could learn the games industry slice of the role fairly easily. So I think again, like the things that I'm always looking for when I'm hiring is just, again, that deep, we've said it like a few times now, that really deep craft expertise. She showcased that on her work she'd done so far and in her experience, those skills I could see her translating to the role that we had.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for that. So we have another question here that was we have had varying, I'm going to kind of combine some questions here as they've been coming in as well. And you, Julia, you touched on this a little bit. So the question is, do I have to be a gamer to get a job or be successful in the gaming industry, right? And you talked about, oh, you could play, D&D and Magic and things like that. Are there other, we have several questions that are coming in of like, well, maybe I'm new to gaming, but someone asked about like, how do I showcase that I'm really interested in telling a narrative, right? So there's all these different ways in. Are there other ways to showcase, Julia? And then we'll pop over to you, Lynda, of in these ways for folks that weren't maybe playing games since they were in diapers?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we talked about a few pieces of this. I think one other way that I could frame an answer that might be helpful to folks is that when you think about the games industry, like I know it can be intimidating and it can seem like out of reach or it can seem very different than other industries, but I think as I said before, like it is just another industry out there. And games companies need the exact same set of folks that any other company needs. An excellent example is my husband also works in gaming and he is a finance guy, right? And he happens to be a gamer, but he was not required to be a gamer by any means for this role because they were looking for someone to do finance stuff, you know? And so remembering that the games industry has a super wide breadth and depth of disciplines they need, and not all of them need to have a really specific relationship to gaming. I think that hopefully will broaden, the horizons of folks, and like you don't have to be a game designer or a software engineer to work on games. There's a huge spectrum of folks that we need to bring these games to people. So yeah, I think that's something else I wanted to just say, like, it helps, it's nice, it's great, but it is not required. But there are some roles that it will be required. So if you wanted to join Valorant or any other game team as maybe like a lead game designer, it would probably be expected that you have some games industry experience. So I think maybe being realistic about where you're aiming and sort of looking at how you can step yourself closer to that role. If you want to be a game director, you might not enter the games industry as a game director, but there are ways to get towards that role. So I think that that's another way to think about it as well.
Oh, I love that. And thanks for sharing that personal anecdote too about your relationship. And that's a nice insight. You're both in the world, but you're coming at it from different places. He has a different training, strong suit. And yet, like you said, a company is a company and someone's got to keep the lights on, and figure all that stuff out. So that's really great. So friends, we're just passing the half-hour mark. So keep those questions coming in. We're going to keep going down that list. We're going to keep going through as many as we can. Lynda, was there anything that you'd like to add to that before we move on to another topic about if you're maybe not a gamer by practice and going into the gaming industry?
Yeah, I think, or I strongly think that you should not feel like you need to be a gamer to apply. And the reason that I believe this is because unlike Julia, I was not playing games when I was in diapers, and actually my parents were really strict with me, and I actually didn't really play like, what I had considered at the time to be your standard fare of video gaming. This would be like your FPSs, your Marios, your like Pokemon. I didn't actually play those until I was in college when I bought my first console. That was like the 3DS. But prior to that, I was only allowed to like play like 1 hour of gaming a week, and I spent that on Neopets diligently. And then after that, I spent that on MapleStory. But so I didn't actually consider myself to be I back then considered to be like a hardcore gamer, right? Or a person who was really like I didn't feel qualified in a way. And but however, I just knew that all throughout high school and all throughout college, I wanted to be working in the industry, and I really liked games, and I liked the idea of games, even though I wasn't allowed to play them. And so I was, making games on my own, and I was thinking about like games from that kind of perspective. And then when I had when I got the design internship offer from Riot, and when I was doing those like design interviews, like all I could think of was like, hey, this is really fun, like, because the way that Riot asks design questions is like they're not trying to figure out like part of design is also thinking about like how you think instead of just like what your background with gaming is, because like in a few years time, like I can play games and I can like understand like RPGs, I can understand FPSs, and I can understand games from like that kind of perspective. But when I first applied, like, to be honest, I didn't feel qualified, and that's because I didn't see myself as like, a gamer or like what I had defined gamer as. But to be honest, like gamer is honestly like anybody who enjoys games and anybody that like appreciates games. And so I think, just to wrap it all back up, I think, especially now when gaming is more democratized, you didn't need to have like a specific console to play a specific game. Like there's like PCs, you know, there's a famous saying, everybody has phones. Like there's, the definition of gamer has expanded so much that I feel like you shouldn't need to like have this high standard of like, I need to be challenger, or I need to be masters, or I need to be like, you know, this very high rank in a specific game to think about applying. And I think like, to, you know, Julia's point, there's some jobs that, you know, require you to have that. Like if you want to be on the analyst team or like the live gameplay team, like where they're doing balance stuff, like, okay, maybe you need to hit a certain rank, but to join the industry, I don't think that's something that's required.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So I'd like to circle back on, because we're getting a bunch of questions about some of the specifics of the internships. So some folks have highlighted that, oh, it says that you need to be enrolled in a program. Someone asked, can you define what a recent grad is? Do we qualify? So Julia, do you have any, can you shine any light on some of the internship questions?
So at Riot, we have an entire team and department that handles our internship program. So as a hiring manager, we don't interface with a lot of that initial getting folks in. They manage the program, the requirements, and they screen our applicants. And then we come in sort of when there's like a narrowed down pool of folks if we have an internship role. So I can't actually speak to a lot of the specifics, but Riot, and I can find the link, I'll find the link when I'm done talking, does have a really robust university program site that you can go to that breaks down a lot of the details. So I'll link that for everybody here in a sec.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I think that'll be a really valuable resource for folks here, and we'll appreciate it. So check the chat for that in just a few moments. And thank you, Julia, for looking for that. So we're going to keep on going down, peppering in our mix of questions here. Okay, what's another one that caught my eye here? Oh, so Lynda, you were just alluding to this. So I'd love to talk about this when you're like, oh, there's this, you know, democratizing of games with consoles and stuff like that. And that's kind of what's been going on now. So someone asked, what do you see in the future of the gaming, or where do you see the future of the gaming industry going? So that can involve technology, business, interface. There's so many different, I mean, we could talk for hours about this topic, but some hot takes that you got.
I don't know if it's hot takes. I just think that like gaming is just going to be more and more like widespread. Especially when you think about how the current culture thinks about gaming and how like, you know, cultures in the past have thought about gaming, because like, you know, 20 years ago, if you were like somebody who was like a gamer, you like gaming was like done by people who owned PCs, but even like 20 years ago, not everybody had owned a PC or owned an Atari. And now like everybody owns like, you know, their personal laptop, their personal computer. And then like everybody essentially has a console on their phone right now, which is their phone. And even thinking about like how popular culture thinks about gaming, like way back then, it was like a very niche thing. And now like all the 12-year-olds are on Fortnite. And that was just a part of like what the collective society thinks of as like, oh, gaming is now just an integrated part of our culture instead of something that only a specific group of people did. And I think like from that pattern, we just see that gaming is now being expanded out and like being redefined as like before gaming was like used to serve a specific niche audience, and now like gaming is just now like there's so many ways to engage with gaming, whether or not it's you're playing games on your phone, you're watching esports, that I just think gaming is going to be just more and more widespread in the future, and also to like there to serve more audiences than it was had in the past.
Yeah, I love that. And I really love, it makes me think of what you were saying in the previous question of this. I love that you were offering up this expanded definition of what a gamer is. And I just love that, of like someone who appreciates games and as well as plays games. And And this, yeah, there's just like, there's more uses as it becomes more widespread. So I love that. So we got about 20 minutes, friends. Just to bring a highlight in the chat, it's already happened once, but I'm going to drop it now so you can see it. Riot Games is hiring. You can check out the open roles there. That's the link. That'll take you to the landing page. You're welcome, Ruth. That'll take you to the landing page on the Power to Fly website. So, and then you can see all the listings there. What's also great about that page is there's a lot of resources from Riot Games, interviews and other videos and other links, and you can see all the job listings there. So check that out, my friends. Okay, and now it's buried in the sea of the chat, which I love, love, love. It is so fun, y'all. Y'all are so much fun in this one. Okay, so before we move on, Julia, do you want to touch on the future of the gaming industry? We get into the crystal ball a little bit.
Oh man, sure. I've definitely plus one to what Lynda said. I do think that we're finding it, as you said, it's more broad, right? Like it used to be very narrow. It used to be, hey, we want to make a very specific thing, a PC game that you do XYZ in. And now when we approach gaming and making games, we really need to think both globally, which again, maybe historically wasn't the case, i.e. A North American company would make a game for Americans and that would be it, English speakers. Now we think about things like LOC and diversity of characters and multi-platform, right? Like how do we make our game able to be reached by the most people? Do we make our game mobile and console also? Do we have it on Steam or not? Like, and that's not a Riot thing, that's just a games approach, right? Like where do we have it? Where do we showcase it? What platforms can folks use? You have to think about your audience and where they are and how they like to play, right? Like historically, Japan is a more console-centric gaming culture. So if you're targeting Japanese players, think about that, right? And so I think that to me, that's when I start thinking about games in the future. It just keeps getting more broad with technology and more broad with global approach to the game. We have new tech, right? Like AI, VR. There's all sorts of augmented reality games. And so I just think it's really exciting because the tech keeps expanding and we keep finding cool new ways to gamify stuff. And so I think that's what I think about when I think about the future of gaming is that I'm really curious about like what the next thing is. Like what's the thing none of us have even thought of yet, the next technology, the next place that we're going to go. It's a really exciting and creative time to be part of this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's several questions, and Julia, I'm going to start with you because you've talked about hiring folks and stuff. And Lynda, if you have some insight, I'd love to hear it too. There's been a lot of questions about, and we've talked about, well, standing out is what in the interview process. There's a lot of questions about that. You know, we've talked a few times about like honing your craft and really working on that. Can you speak to, if we want to expand on that, maybe hearing about, and this will vary, of course, depending on the role, but what the interview process is like? Can you shine a little light on that, Julia?
Yeah, absolutely. Different companies have different interview processes, but they're often the thread I think in the games industry is they're really robust, and you go through a lot of phases. You meet a lot of people in the company, and again, that's just to make sure that I think it's for both parties, right? Like it's to make sure the team gets to know you really well and to make sure you get to know the company well enough to make a good decision. Because at the end of the day, as you're going through an interview process with any company in any industry, you're interviewing each other, right? Like the company is trying to grok quickly if you seem like a good fit for the need they have, and you're trying to understand if you feel like you will be a good fit for that company and their culture and their jobs, right? Again, some of the things we look for, and I've talked about craft a few times, but to even dig into like what does craft even mean, right? Like for design, we look for folks like, do you understand the products and the goals that you're working on? Do you understand the features you've worked on in the past? How do you think about design problem spaces at the right level, about the scope of your product? Do you think about platforms and how you approach your solutions through platforms? Are you realistic about interaction designs? You know, especially I think in games, maybe even more than other industries I've worked in, like the design solutions are baked within a huge set of constraints. Like I know it might seem like, oh man, Riot could do anything. It's Riot, it's a huge company, but there's actually like a wild amount of constraints. It might be time, it might be people, it might be technology, it might be scheduling with other things we're doing. And so do you have experience managing all of those touch points and trying to figure out a solution that meets those needs? sometimes we, I know that there were some questions I've seen fly by about leadership specifically, like, can you lead design with vision? Do you have experience creating the vision for a product? Like, what is the blue sky direction you're aiming for versus like, what are the steps you're going to try to get you and your team to get there? Can you articulate goals and design intent? How do you partner with other people? I think Lynda mentioned this on some answer earlier. I think it's really important to double down on, like, again, Lynda and I've joked about it, like, as you grow through your career, especially in design, you become more and more of a product manager and a project manager, and you start to use that language because it's really important to speak the same language as the folks you're collaborating with. So where, design is my craft, I often find at this, in my current role, even more of my time is spent in meetings and talking with my producers and my product folks and trying to align on goals and things like that. And so you sort of start branching out your skill set once you get in there. Yeah, so I think that, we really dig into a lot of that during the interview process. And I think that's why most game companies have a really robust, and it seems quite like long often interview processes, because we're really trying to dig into a lot of these different areas.
Yeah. And on that note, a few people asked, like, if you're not going to move forward with the job, do they let you know? Some people have asked about that little detail. Do you know? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. I saw that. I think they do. I would put like an asterisk on, I imagine maybe it varies between recruiters as well. Like, I think our recruiters have a sort of an approach to it, but you can always reach out to the recruiter, especially if you've gotten to, in any way through your process, and ask for an update or ask for the status of your application. So yeah, you can definitely do that anytime.
I love that. Okay, friends, it's going so well. Lynda, was there anything you want to add on that topic before I move on to another question?
No, I think Julia covered a lot of the stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. So there was a question that's been +1 a few times, so I'm going to give it a shout. Someone, originally it was Rusty's question, and then Ed +1'd it, retyped it by hand apparently to get it in there. Some other people were like, yes, this question. So how can you get your foot in the door when you're a few years into your career? Without an internship, it's unclear how one can enter the gaming industry without joining a senior director role, for instance, there in marketing. Either of you, this is a kind of a specific question, but also I think there's a lot of people in here relating to the pivoting aspect, right? And this is an exciting industry, popcorn style. Either of you like to jump in?
I tried to throw a quick answer in the chat, so sorry if you've seen that and I'm repeating myself. Again, like any other sort of interview process or job seeking process that you're in, games companies are typically hiring for all levels of role, rather, right? From junior to mid to senior to principal to, upper leadership. And so often not always, but often there are roles at any level for you to jump into. So again, when I applied to Blizzard the first time, I was currently in a role that was sort of what we would equate to maybe like a senior manager at Riot. But the job that I ended up applying for was actually a senior, so it would be like a step or two down. But that's because also games companies often scope their role leveling a little different. So I think there's some flexibility in role leveling. So I always recommend, look at the job description. It always breaks down like, hey, we would expect this person to have 3 or so years of experience, or we expect this person to have 5 or more years of experience, or 7 or more years of experience, right? Like, we try to be really explicit in our job descriptions to help you guys make decisions on where you think that a role might meet your experience and your needs. So definitely keep an eye out for roles of appropriate levels. And also, especially if you're looking to pivot, and you're able, again, this is like a very privileged answer, but if you're able, consider roles that are adjacent that would get you experience, or companies that are adjacent that would get you experience. I often recommend to folks that, it might not always be possible or even desirable for you to go to a big company like Riot or Blizzard or, Epic or one of those companies, when there's a lot of different types of roles at smaller game companies that might have a different set of responsibilities and ability to support you in your learning. So like when I worked, again, not in gaming, but when I worked in a startup, the scope of my responsibility was so broad because when I started at the startup, I was the only designer, and then I hired a few, and then I was one of a couple designers. And so you're responsible for everything. And that sort of trial by fire let me learn a lot. And then when I came to a big company, the scope of my responsibility was really narrow, right? Like, I was responsible for a very specific feature and team, but I had all that experience I had gained from my other industry. So I think that's another way to think about it as well, is that sometimes it is harder to just make a jump directly into a big company, but maybe you're looking for a startup, or maybe you're looking to move from a big company to a startup. It's a lot of that is around identifying personally what you're looking for. Do you want to be like a big fish in a little pool and like have a huge amount of responsibility, or are you looking to really narrow your focus on something?
Awesome. Thank you, Julia. Thank you for chiming in on that with the chat earlier. And thank you for bringing voice to that and expanding on that. Because also, as this is being recorded and this is going to go out, more people are going to get to hear your answer there where they couldn't read that in the chat. So thank you so much for taking the time on that. Okay, friends. So we have about a little less than 10 minutes left. Lynda, we can pop over to you for the next question. This several people have been asking about over the past couple of years with working from home and how that obviously has shifted every industry that involves a computer. So it's been a big aspect of many tech jobs. Is that something that has an effect on careers in the gaming industry? And for people who maybe struggle that are to relocate due to various reasons, perhaps disabilities, perhaps just they need to stay in a certain location. So can you talk about the working from home and do you think that's changed the hiring process at all? Or is it just a new environment?
I think working from home, it depends on the company policy, and it depends on how you and your team feels. I think right now, given the trend of having people being able to work from home, more and more gaming companies and more companies in the industry are letting or are like saying, hey, remote work is one of the perks that we offer. And I think if you're wondering, oh, is remote going to be a thing that prevents you from getting into the industry? The answer is no.
Copy that. Great. I love that. Julia, any insights you want to speak to the working from home environment, hybrid situation?
No, I think Lynda covered it really well. I think that again, like all companies and all industries are still trying to figure out like how we move forward in this sort of new landscape. So, but to Lynda's point, there are opportunities for all flavors of in office through full remote in the games industry. If you keep looking out there, different companies are taking different approaches and pivoting and trying new things. So I think it's actually a really exciting time to be trying to get a job in the games industry. There's a lot more flexibility, I think, than there used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So I'm going to combine, we've got several questions. This is a pre-submitted question and other people have asked, similar question. So when it comes to graphic design portfolio, is it best for your portfolio to showcase examples from or closely related to gaming, or should you branch out and have examples from every type of media? Lynda, do you want to touch on this first?
I think Julia might be better for a graphic design
Sure.
portfolio.
Yeah, totally.
I think my recommendation for portfolios, and I hope it's cool, Hunter. I kind of want to combine this with one of our other questions that was more about art
Please.
and illustration portfolios. When we look at portfolios, I think the best thing you can do at any level is to try to tailor it toward the role you're applying for, rather than having a broad swath of all sorts of different things. If the role is specific, and what I mean is at Blizzard, for instance, designer as a role was pretty broad. We sort of didn't narrow it down beyond that term designer. So we would hire people that had really great UI skills. We would hire really great UX designers, people with heavy research skills, and it would be more tailored to the role. At Riot, we have a very structured job architecture, and UX designers are part of a design pillar. UI and art folks are part of the art pillar, and we look for very different things because we expect people to have a really sort of T-shaped expertise in their field. So when you're reading through job descriptions from any company, take a cue from what they're looking for, I would say, and do your best to sort of tailor the work you're showing to that sort of area. And it doesn't mean it has to be games related, but if you're looking to I don't know, have a job description that's like, hey, we'd like to have somebody come help us work on, I don't know, the store for Valorant. Do you have any projects that are e-commerce related? Could you mock up something? Could you evaluate something that's out there in the field? Do you have a school project that was related to e-commerce maybe? That kind of helps. Again, like that helps the recruiters and also the hiring managers connect the dots in what and how it could be reflected in the role they're looking for. And then the other thing I just wanted to answer was that one of the other pre-submitted questions we had was, what do recruiters want to see in my portfolio when applying for art and illustration positions? Neither Lynda and I work in that specific field, but I did ask our visual design hiring manager on VALORANT to give me some feedback so I could give it to you guys, because I recognize that we're both designers, so our answers are pretty like design centric. So I wanted to give the feedback from Melanie, who is our senior visual design manager. So the things that she looks for when talking about illustration or art portfolios, there's 4 things that are her top things she looks for. The abilities to demonstrate craftsmanship, a strong art fundamentals for color, composition, value, form, brushwork, and perspective. She looks for the ability to execute in multiple different styles artistically, so having a good artistic range. She's looking to see a variety of styles well executed in someone's portfolio that gives it an edge. She's also looking for the ability to conceptualize ideas and creative thinking, being able to see and speak to the creative process and how they approach given tasks on multi-step problems before taking it to a final solution. And finally, she's also looking for the ability to work on different media and with different technology. Depending on the team you join, you might work in Unreal, you might work in something like Figma or Photoshop or Sketch. And so just understanding the tool set of the job you're applying for and having some skill in that is really helpful. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well.
I love that. Thank you so much for that. All right, friends, we got to wrap it up. 3 minutes left. This just one flew by. I want to, if you can keep this one brief before we do our last slide, friends, but someone asked a great question, Julia and Lynda, was sort of a fun one. They're like, what's something in your portfolio that no one really ever asks you about that you wish you could showcase more? So that's a little fun one. Do you have anything, Lynda, that you're like, oh, I have this thing that I just love that no one knows about?
Portfolio.
Or like something you're proud of in your work?
It's a really hard answer. Could I defer that to Julia first?
Yeah, we'll pass over to Julia and I'll pull up our last slide.
Yeah, I absolutely have a quick one. When I was in grad school, I did a lot of work because I went through, and I will keep it brief, I went through a traditional graphic design program for grad school at Savannah College of Art and Design. And a lot of the work I did was around book craft and letter press work and printmaking and typography. And that is just not something that in the industry anyone's ever really asked me about. But I have really rad projects. So I did really creative sort of book design that I was super proud of at the time, and I'm still proud of. But those projects didn't end up being related to the work I ended up doing in my career. So I never really get to like showcase those and talk to them. So if I could, I would totally showcase some of my book stuff.
Oh, yeah. I just love that. Well, unfortunately, friends, we are pretty much out of time here. We're not going to get to everyone's questions. I'm so sorry about that. But we just want to touch on some of these last couple of questions here. We asked Julia and Lynda some questions when they asked, how would you describe the culture in one word? Julia said fluid. Lynda said collaborative. What's your favorite part about working at Riot Games? Julia, you said working on IPs that serve millions of people globally and working with the most talented folks in the industry. Lynda, working with talented people on projects that excite and challenge me. And what are your top tips for someone who is interviewing? I think a lot of folks want to hear that. Julia, you said be deliberate in what you show, share, prepare to talk about your experience and how it relates to the job. Ask questions. Lynda says +1 to asking good questions. The interview is a two-way conversation. Such good tips. So Julia, Lynda, thank you so much for making the time today. This has been such a fun, impactful conversation. I think so helpful for a lot of people. Are there ways that they can reach out, stay connected to you? Are you on LinkedIn? What's the best way? Julia, we'll start with you.
Yeah, probably the best way with me is I'm on Twitter. I'm the Makerist on Twitter. And so feel free to follow me there. I don't often tweet solely about work. I super usually don't tweet about VALORANT specifically, but I do often share things about just the industry and design in general and just personal stuff. So feel free to find me there.
Awesome. Thank you. And how about you, Lynda?
I'm also on Twitter. So if you have any questions, please feel free to at me there. And I occasionally check LinkedIn. So
yeah, I also
that's
rarely check LinkedIn. So I apologize if I ever miss something from someone there. I am almost never there.
Cool. We'll see you on Twitter then.
Yes.
All right, friends. Well, let's give Julia and Lynda a digital round of applause. Thank you so much. And I hope you all and thank you so much for participating, everyone. This chat was going off this was wild. This was amazing. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.
On.
Thank
And
you.
thank you, Julia. Thank you, Lynda. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.